He was a quiet man in a quiet town, a ghost who kept the past buried until the day the town decided to bury him. If you believe the forgotten stories of honorable men deserve to be told, help us continue our mission with a super thanks. And if you stand with this silent warrior, leave us "Stay strong, Josiah" in the comments below. Josiah Cole lived his life by a code the world had long since forgotten. It was a code of discipline, of order, of quiet endurance. His small rented cottage at the edge of Harmony Creek, Georgia, was a testament to this code. The floorboards were scrubbed clean, the single bed was made each morning with military corners, and the few books on his shelf were arranged by height with geometric precision. To his neighbors, he was just the gardener from the Magnolia Inn, a tall, powerfully built black man in his late 40s who kept to himself, his face a mask of polite, unreadable neutrality. They saw his calloused hands, his faded work clothes, his slow, deliberate way of walking. They saw a simple, unassuming man. They did not see the muscle memory that still knew how to field strip a rifle in under 30 seconds in total darkness. They did not see the eyes, which seemed placid, but were in fact constantly scanning, assessing, noting details others missed. They did not see the ghost of the command sergeant major who had led men through the dust and fire of Fallujah, a man who had carried the weight of life and death decisions on his shoulders and brought most of his men home. He had come to Harmony Creek seeking silence, a place where the ghosts of the past might finally quiet their shouting. For 5 years, he had almost found it. Harmony Creek was a town that prided itself on its tranquility. It was a postcard of southern charm, with its historic town square, its grand white-pillared homes draped in wisteria, and its genteel, slow-moving pace of life. But beneath the placid surface, the town operated on an older, more rigid code than Josiah's. It was a code of lineage, of wealth, of who belonged and who did not. And at the absolute pinnacle of that order were the Carmichaels. The Carmichael family had not just founded Harmony Creek, in many ways they still owned it. They owned the bank, the textile mill that was the town's largest employer, and through generations of influence and backroom deals, they owned the quiet deference of its public officials. The current heir to this dynasty was Preston Carmichael III, a young man in his late 20s who wore his family's power like a bespoke suit with an casual, unthinking arrogance. He was a creature of entitlement, a man who had never been told no in his life, and he treated the town and its inhabitants as his personal property. Josiah knew of Preston Carmichael. He had seen him at the Magnolia Inn, where Preston would often entertain friends, his voice loud, his laughter laced with a casual cruelty as he belittled the staff. Josiah, trimming the prize-winning azaleas that lined the inn's veranda, would be invisible to them, a piece of the scenery. He would listen, his face impassive, his hands moving with steady, methodical precision, and he would recognize the type. He had seen men like Preston before, in officers' uniforms, men whose rank had been bought by family connections, not earned by merit. They were a liability in the field, a danger to everyone around them. In a place like Harmony Creek, they were simply a fact of life. Josiah's world and Preston's were parallel universes, destined never to intersect. Until the night of the accident. It was a hot, humid evening in late summer. Josiah was walking home from the inn, the long day's labor a satisfying ache in his muscles. The sun had just set, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and purple. He was walking along the quiet, tree-lined road that led out of town when he heard it. The high-pitched, angry roar of a powerful sports car engine being pushed to its limit, followed by the sickening squeal of tires and a sudden percussive thud that was horribly, unmistakably the sound of a heavy object striking a human body. He saw the car, a sleek, dark blue convertible, swerve wildly before accelerating, its taillights disappearing into the dusk. He didn't think, he ran. His soldier's instincts, the combat medic training that had been drilled into him 2 decades ago, took over. He found the source of the sound in the deep shadows at the side of the road. It was a bicycle, its front wheel bent into a mangled figure 8, and beside it, lying in a broken, unnatural heap, was a boy. Josiah recognized him instantly. It was Timothy Gable, the 14-year-old son of the woman who worked at the local diner. Josiah's mind went into a cold, clear, tactical mode. He knelt, his fingers immediately going to the boy's neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint and thready. He saw the unnatural angle of the boy's leg, a clear compound fracture, bone showing white against the darkening skin. He saw the gash on the boy's forehead, bleeding profusely. "Stay with me, son," Josiah said, his voice a low, calm, authoritative rumble, the same voice he had used to keep terrified young privates from going into shock. "Help is coming." He quickly, efficiently took off his own sturdy work shirt and began to fashion a tourniquet for the leg, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. He was completely focused. His world narrowed to this single critical mission, keeping this boy alive. He did not hear the approaching siren until it was almost on top of him. When the police car skidded to a halt, its headlights pinning him in their harsh white glare, he looked up, momentarily blinded. He saw two officers emerge, their hands already on their weapons. They saw a chaotic scene, a wrecked bicycle, a grievously injured white teenager, and a large, disheveled black man, his hands covered in blood, leaning over the boy. They did not see a rescuer. They saw a suspect. "Get away from him! Put your hands in the air! Now!" the officer barked, his voice sharp with adrenaline and a pre-written narrative. Josiah slowly, deliberately raised his hands, his movements calm and non-threatening. "The boy needs an ambulance," he said, his voice steady. "His leg is broken, and he's lost a lot of blood." A dark blue convertible hit him and kept going, but they weren't listening. The second officer was already on the radio, and the words Josiah heard sent a chill of cold, hard certainty through him. A possible assault. Suspect is a black male, approximately 6 feet, 2 inches. Vehicle involved is unknown at this time. The narrative was already being set, the facts being molded to fit the easiest, most convenient conclusion. Within minutes, the scene was a circus. An ambulance arrived and took the boy, and then another car pulled up. Not a police car, but the sleek black sedan of the town's most powerful lawyer, a man who was on the Carmichael family's payroll. A few quiet words were exchanged with the ranking officer. The story of a speeding blue convertible was quietly forgotten. The focus narrowed, tightened, and settled with the crushing weight of inevitability on Josiah. The humiliation was a quiet, methodical, and public affair. They pushed him against the side of the patrol car, his face pressed against the cool, dusty metal. They kicked his feet apart. They patted him down in front of a small, growing crowd of his neighbors, their faces a mixture of shock, fear, and a dark, prurient curiosity. He did not resist. He did not argue. The soldier in him knew that this was not a battle to be fought here in the open against overwhelming force. This was an ambush, and in an ambush the first priority is to survive, to endure, to wait for the moment to fight back on your own terms. He allowed his face to become a mask of impassive neutrality. He controlled his breathing, just as he had done when under enemy fire. He locked away his rage, his fear, his profound, searing sense of injustice, deep in a place where they could not touch it. They cuffed his hands behind his back, the cold steel, a familiar, hateful weight on his wrists. As they pushed him into the back of the car, he saw the faces of the people he had lived beside for 5 years. He saw no one who spoke up for him. He saw no one who questioned the official story that was unfolding before their eyes. He saw only the silent, passive acceptance of a town that knew the rules. A Carmichael was in trouble, and a scapegoat was required. And Josiah Cole, the quiet, invisible gardener, was the perfect choice. They thought they were arresting a nobody, a piece of human driftwood. They had no idea they had just declared war on a man who had forgotten more about fighting than they would ever know. The Harmony Creek police station was less a bastion of law and order and more a small, shabby monument to bureaucratic apathy. It was a place of peeling paint, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the stale, lingering smell of old coffee and quiet desperation. For Josiah, the process of being booked was a slow, grinding exercise in methodical humiliation. They took his fingerprints, the ink a greasy, black stain on the hands that had, just an hour before, been working to save a life. They took his photograph, the flash of the camera, a cold, impersonal glare that captured not a man, but a suspect. his face framed against a height chart, reducing his identity to a set of stark, incriminating numbers. He submitted to it all with a profound, unnerving stillness. His silence was not the sullen defiance of a common criminal, nor the panicked babble of an innocent man. It was the disciplined, watchful silence of a soldier in enemy territory, gathering intelligence, assessing his captors, and waiting for his opportunity. The two officers who had arrested him, a young, jumpy rookie named Miller and a more seasoned, cynical veteran named Davis, conducted the initial interrogation. They sat him in a small, windowless room at a metal table that was bolted to the floor. The air was thick and close. Davis led the questioning, his approach a lazy, looping series of assumptions and leading questions. "So, Josiah," he began, leaning back in his chair, his tone a parody of casual conversation, "what's a man like you doing out on that road after dark? You don't live out that way." "I was walking home from my job at the inn," Josiah said, his voice calm and even, "the same way I walk every night." "And you just happened to stumble upon the boy?" Davis asked, a note of theatrical disbelief in his voice. "Just a good Samaritan, is that it?" "A car hit him," Josiah stated, repeating the simple, unadorned truth. "A dark blue convertible. It didn't stop." Davis exchanged a look with Miller, a small, patronizing smirk. "A blue convertible," he repeated, as if the idea was the most outlandish thing he had ever heard. "You're sure you didn't see a flying saucer, too? The boy, Timmy, he's got a concussion. Woke up for a minute in the ambulance. He said he was riding his bike and a man grabbed him, pulled him off his bike. He said he fought back." The lie was so audacious, so cynically constructed, that for a moment, Josiah felt a surge of pure, hot rage. It was a classic tactic: twist the victim's confused, trauma-induced memories into a weapon against the accused. They had their story, a story that conveniently protected the real perpetrator, and they were going to hammer him with it until it became the official truth. He saw the trap. If he argued, if he got angry, he would be playing their game. He would be the violent, unstable black man they wanted him to be. So he drew on his training, on the brutal, dispassionate discipline that had been drilled into him at SEER school: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. He controlled his breathing. He lowered his heart rate. He became a stone wall of calm. "I did not touch the boy," he said, his voice a low, steady monotone, "except to render first aid." "First aid?" Davis chuckled, a harsh, ugly sound. "Is that what you call it? He's got bruises on his arms, Josiah. Bruises that look like they came from a man's strong hands. Maybe you got angry. Maybe he said something you didn't like, and you just snapped." Josiah said nothing. He had seen the bruises. He had made them himself when he had gripped the boy's arm to steady him while he applied the tourniquet. His act of salvation was being twisted into the evidence of his crime. There was no way to win this argument. The facts did not matter. The only thing that mattered was the story the powerful wanted to tell. He simply met Davis's gaze, his own eyes calm and unblinking. His silence was more unnerving to the officers than any shouted denial would have been. It was the silence of a man who was not afraid of them, a man who was operating on a level they could not comprehend. After an hour of fruitless, circular questioning, they gave up, their lazy bullying defeated by his quiet, impenetrable resolve. They led him to a holding cell, a small concrete box with a single stained mattress on a metal slab and the foul, lingering stench of human misery. The heavy steel door slammed shut, the sound of the lock turning a final definitive note of punctuation. He was caged. He did not pace. He did not rant or rave. He sat on the edge of the hard slab, his back straight, and he began to methodically analyze his situation, just as he would if he had been captured behind enemy lines. He assessed his resources. None. He assessed his allies. None that he knew of. He assessed his enemy, a powerful, wealthy family with the local law enforcement and legal system firmly in their pocket. And he assessed his objective, survival, and then justice. He knew that the system he was now in was not designed to find the truth. It was designed to process him. It would assign him a public defender who was overworked and under-resourced, who would advise him to take a plea bargain to a lesser charge to avoid a long, costly trial he was certain to lose. He would become another statistic, another black man chewed up and spat out by a system that was not broken, but was, in fact, working exactly as intended. He knew that if he was to survive this, he could not rely on the system. He had to rely on himself, on his mind, on his training. He had to fight an asymmetric war. He spent the night in a state of controlled, wakeful rest, his mind a quiet, whirring engine of tactical planning. He replayed every detail of the accident, every word of the interrogation, every look on the faces of the officers. He was looking for a weakness, a seam in their story, a single loose thread that he could pull on, the blue convertible. That was the key. They had dismissed it, buried it under a mountain of lies, but it was the one hard, physical fact. If he could prove that Carr existed, that it was connected to the Carmichaels, he could break their narrative. But how? He was locked in a cage, cut off from the world. He had no one to investigate for him, no one to make the calls, no one to be his eyes and ears on the outside. He was, for the first time since his early days as a raw recruit, completely and utterly alone, or so he thought. The next morning, a new guard, a man he had not seen before, brought him a breakfast tray of grey, watery oatmeal and a cup of bitter coffee. As the guard slid the tray through the slot in the door, he hesitated. "Josiah Cole?" he asked, his voice a low, hesitant whisper. Josiah looked at him. The guard was an older black man, his face a mask of weary resignation, the face of a man who had seen too much and expected too little. "I'm Cole," Josiah said. The guard glanced nervously down the empty hallway. "My wife, she works at the diner with Timmy Gable's mom," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "She said you were a good man." "Quiet, always polite. She don't believe a word of what they're saying." He pushed a folded newspaper through the slot along with the food tray. "It's all in there," he whispered. "The official story. They're crucifying you." He paused, his gaze meeting Josiah's. A flicker of something, solidarity, shared history, passing between them. "There's a pencil in the spine of the paper," he said, his voice barely audible, "and a phone number, a lawyer, a real one, from Atlanta, a man who ain't afraid of the Carmichaels. He owes my family a favor. If you want, he'll come." And then he was gone, his footsteps receding down the hall, leaving Josiah alone in the silence. Josiah unfolded the newspaper. The headline was a punch to the gut. "Local gardener arrested in brutal attack on teen." The story was a masterpiece of character assassination, quoting anonymous neighbors who described him as reclusive and unfriendly, and citing his lack of any local family as suspicious. And there on the front page was his booking photo, a stark, grainy image of a grim-faced black man, already tried and convicted in the court of public opinion. He felt the rage rise again, hot and raw, but then he remembered the guard's words. He remembered the pencil. He carefully, painstakingly extracted the small, sharpened pencil stub from the newspaper's binding, and he saw the phone number written in tiny, precise letters on the margin of the classifieds page. A lawyer, a real one. It was a lifeline, a weapon, a single, unexpected crack in the enemy's fortress. He was not alone. In the quiet, forgotten corners of this town, there were still good people, people who had not been bought, who had not been intimidated. They were a silent, invisible network of resistance, and they had just given him his first tool to begin to fight back. He sat down on the hard slab, the pencil in his hand, and he began to plan his counterattack. The war for Harmony Creek had begun. The name written on the newspaper margin was Benjamin Carter. To the legal establishment of Georgia, Ben Carter was a ghost, a myth, a cautionary tale whispered in the hallowed halls of Atlanta's most powerful law firms. He had once been one of them, a brilliant rising star at a prestigious corporate firm, a man with a golden future. But something had broken in him, or perhaps something had been set right. He had walked away from the money and the power, disgusted by a system that dispensed justice based on the size of a client's bank account. He had become a legal Ronin, a lone warrior, who now only took on the cases that no one else would touch, the hopeless, the forgotten, the ones that pitted a single powerless individual against the full, crushing weight of the establishment. He was a man who fought not for fees, but for a principle, a fact that made him both unpredictable and incredibly dangerous. He was exactly the kind of ally Josiah needed. Using his one legally mandated phone call, Josiah did not call a family member he didn't have or a friend he couldn't burden. He called the number from the newspaper. The voice that answered was not that of a polished paralegal, but the gruff, impatient voice of the man himself. "Carter, my name is Josiah Cole," Josiah said, his voice calm and steady. "I'm in the Harmony Creek jail. I was given your number. I need help." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, a silence in which Josiah could feel himself being weighed and measured. "Harmony Creek," Carter said finally, the name itself a diagnosis of the problem. "Carmichael country. What did they pin on you?" Josiah gave him the stark, unadorned facts. The hit and run, the injured boy, the lies of the police, the invisible presence of the Carmichael family pulling the strings. He did not plead his innocence. He did not get emotional. He delivered his report with the dispassionate clarity of a soldier briefing his commanding officer. Carter listened without interruption, his silence a sign of a keen, analytical mind at work. When Josiah was finished, there was another long pause. "They're railroading you," Carter said. The words a simple statement of an obvious truth. "They've got the victim, they've got the police, they've got the whole town on their side. You've got nothing. Why should I take this case? Why should I drive 100 miles to stick my hand in a beehive for a man I've never met?" It was a test. Carter wasn't asking about the evidence. He was asking about the man. He was asking for a reason to believe, a reason to fight. "Because the truth matters," Josiah said, the words coming from a deep, quiet place within him. "And because I am not a man who knows how to surrender." The simple, profound dignity in his answer seemed to be enough. There was a dry chuckle on the other end of the line. "All right, Mr. Cole," Ben Carter said. "You've got a lawyer. Don't say another word to anyone. I'll be there by noon." The click of the phone ending the call was the sound of the first cannon shot in his counter-offensive. Hope, a dangerous and unfamiliar emotion, began to stir in Josiah's chest. He had an ally. The war was no longer a solitary one. Ben Carter arrived at the Harmony Creek jail exactly at noon, as promised. He was not what the local deputies expected. He was a tall, thin, and rumpled man in a slightly too large linen suit that looked like it had been slept in. He had a shock of unruly grey hair and the weary, cynical eyes of a man who has seen the very worst of human nature and has, somehow, not been broken by it. He looked more like a down-on-his-luck college professor than a high-powered lawyer. But when he spoke, his voice was a weapon, a sharp, precise instrument that cut through the lazy, bureaucratic fog of the station. He presented his credentials, demanded to see his client, and cited case law and procedural statutes with a casual, off-the-cuff brilliance that left the deputies flustered and vaguely intimidated. They had expected a fight they could win through bullying and stonewalling. They were not prepared for a fight against a man who knew their own rule book better than they did. The meeting between Josiah and Carter took place in the same small, airless interrogation room. Carter didn't bother with pleasantries. He dropped a thin, battered briefcase on the table and got straight to the point. "All right, Mr. Cole, I've read the police report. It's a work of fiction, but it's a well-constructed one. They've got the boy's statement, they've got the arresting officer's testimony, and they've got you, a stranger with no ties to the community, covered in the victim's blood. On paper, this is a slam dunk for them. So, you're going to tell me everything, not just what happened that night. Everything. Who you are, where you come from, why a man like you ends up working as a gardener in a town like this. The one thing I cannot abide is a client who lies to me. Your life is in my hands. I suggest you start acting like it." His words were harsh, his gaze uncompromising. He was not offering comfort. He was demanding the truth, the whole truth, the ammunition he would need to fight this war. And so, for the first time in 5 years, Josiah Cole broke his silence. He told this rumpled, cynical stranger the story of his life. He spoke of his 25 years in the United States Army, of the Rangers, of the desert, of the men he had led and the men he had lost. He spoke of the heavy, suffocating weight of command, of the ghosts that had followed him home. He spoke of his search for a quiet place, a place where he could outrun the noise in his own head. He did not speak with pride or with self-pity. He simply recounted the facts of his life with the same dispassionate clarity he had used to describe the accident. He was not trying to impress the lawyer. He was simply obeying an order, providing a full and accurate intelligence report. Carter listened, his chin resting on his steepled fingers, his weary eyes never leaving Josiah's face. He did not interrupt. He did not ask questions. He simply absorbed the story, his sharp legal mind sifting through the details, looking for the man beneath the facts. When Josiah was finished, the room was silent for a long time. Carter finally leaned back in his chair, a slow, thoughtful expression on his face. "Command Sergeant Major," he said, the title spoken with a new, profound note of respect. "I should have seen it. The way you carry yourself, the discipline. It all makes sense now." He tapped a finger on the table. "This is good," he murmured, more to himself than to Josiah. "This is very, very good. They think they're prosecuting a drifter, a nobody. They have no idea they've picked a fight with a man who has commanded a battalion. This changes the entire strategic landscape." Carter's mind was already at work, the pieces of a new strategy clicking into place. "They've built their case around your character, or what they've invented it to be," he explained. "They've painted you as an unstable, reclusive, and dangerous man. We are going to destroy that narrative. We are going to show the world, and more importantly, a jury, who Josiah Cole really is. We are not just going to defend you, we are going to prosecute them in the court of public opinion." His plan was audacious. He would not just focus on the facts of the case, on the blue convertible they couldn't yet prove existed. He would put Josiah's entire life, his record of service, his honor, on trial. He would subpoena his military records, his commendations, his fitness reports. He would track down the men who had served under him and bring them to Harmony Creek to testify to his character. He would turn the small local trial into a referendum on how this country treats its veterans, its heroes. "The Carmichaels are used to fighting in the shadows," Carter said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "They thrive in the dark. We are going to drag this whole sordid mess into the blinding light of day, and we are going to let them see what a man of real honor looks like." The strategy was a high-risk gamble. It could backfire spectacularly, painting Josiah as an arrogant, decorated soldier who thought he was above the law. But it was also a brilliant piece of asymmetric warfare. It was a fight the Carmichaels and their small-town legal machine were completely unprepared for. They were ready for a legal skirmish. Carter was preparing for a full-scale moral war. Josiah looked at the rumpled, brilliant man sitting across from him, and for the first time, he understood. This man was a warrior just like him. They spoke a different language, fought on a different kind of battlefield, but their code was the same: the fight for justice, for truth, for honor. "What do you need me to do, counselor?" Josiah asked, his voice steady. He was no longer just a client. He was a soldier, ready to follow his commander into battle. Ben Carter's legal assault on Harmony Creek began not with a thunderous roar, but with a quiet, relentless barrage of paper. From a makeshift command post in a dusty, rented room above the town's only diner, a room that smelled of old legal books and fried bacon, he unleashed a blizzard of motions, subpoenas, and discovery requests that buried the small, sleepy prosecutor's office and the local police department in an avalanche of work they were utterly unprepared to handle. He was a master of procedural warfare, using the very rules of the system that was designed to crush men like Josiah as a weapon against it. He requested every piece of evidence, no matter how trivial: the complete, unedited dispatch logs from the night of the accident, the maintenance records for every patrol car in the fleet, the personnel files and disciplinary histories of the arresting officers, Davis and Miller. He filed a motion to have the case moved out of Harmony Creek. arguing that a fair and impartial jury could not be found in a town so completely under the thumb of the Carmichael family. The motion was, of course, denied by a local judge whose golf membership was paid for by the Carmichael Bank, but the filing itself served its purpose. It put the town's incestuous power structure on the official record. It was the first shot across the bow. While Carter tied the local legal system in knots, he also began his campaign in the court of public opinion. He gave one, and only one, interview, not to the local paper which he knew was a mouthpiece for the town's elite, but to a tough, respected investigative reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He framed the story not as a simple hit and run, but as a profound and disturbing tale of small-town corruption and the disgraceful treatment of a decorated war hero. The story, when it ran, was a bombshell. The headline, "Hero or Suspect?" Georgia Town Jail's decorated veteran in mysterious accident was accompanied by two photographs. One was Josiah's grim, dehumanizing booking photo. The other was a photograph Carter's investigator had unearthed from the military archives. A younger, harder Josiah, in full combat gear in the Iraqi desert, receiving a medal for valor from a general, his face a mask of quiet, resolute dignity. The juxtaposition was devastating. It was a visual narrative that told a more powerful story than any legal argument could. The story went viral. Veterans groups across the country began to rally, outraged by the treatment of one of their own. The quiet, local case was suddenly a national story, and the harsh, unwelcome glare of the media spotlight was now fixed firmly on the once tranquil town of Harmony Creek. For Josiah, still locked in his cell, the changes were subtle but significant. The guards, who had once treated him with a mixture of contempt and fear, now looked at him with a new, grudging respect. Even Davis, the cynical veteran cop, seemed to have lost some of his swagger. The guard who had given him Carter's number would occasionally slip him an extra biscuit with his breakfast, a small, silent gesture of solidarity. He was no longer just an anonymous suspect. He was a cause. He was a symbol. Carter visited him daily, not just to discuss legal strategy, but to conduct what Josiah came to recognize as a form of psychological conditioning. Carter was preparing him for the trial, for the witness stand, drilling him, testing him, strengthening his resolve. "They are going to attack you," Carter would say, his voice a low, intense growl. "They are going to twist your service record. They will call you a trained killer. They will say your PTSD makes you unstable, a walking time bomb. They will try to provoke you, to make you angry, and you will not give them the satisfaction. You will sit there and you will be exactly who you are, a command sergeant major. You will be calm. You will be disciplined. You will show them a strength and a dignity they are incapable of understanding. Your stillness will be our greatest weapon." Meanwhile, Carter's investigator, a former Atlanta PD, detective named Maria Flores, a woman with a bulldog's tenacity and a deep-seated hatred of corrupt cops, was on the ground, quietly, methodically, hunting for the blue convertible. She worked in the shadows, talking to mechanics at small back-road garages, to bartenders at rundown roadside bars, to anyone who might have seen something and who was not on the Carmichael payroll. It was a frustrating, needle-in-a-haystack search. The Carmichaels had done a good job of burying their tracks. But Flores was a patient hunter. She knew that every secret leaves a trace, a faint scent that a good detective can follow. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Timothy Gable, the boy who had been hit, was recovering. His leg was healing, and his memory, once clouded by the trauma and the concussion, was beginning to clear. His mother, a proud, hard-working woman named Sarah, who had always been quietly friendly with Josiah at the diner, was racked with guilt and confusion. She had been fed the police's story, but in her heart, she couldn't reconcile the official narrative with the quiet, gentle man who had always left her a generous tip and asked about her son. She confided her doubts to the old guard at the jail, her husband's cousin, who in turn passed the information on to Carter. Carter sent Flores to the hospital. She did not go as a lawyer's investigator. She went as a concerned family friend, a role she played to perfection. She spoke to Sarah not about the case, but about her son, about his recovery, earning her trust. And then quietly, gently, she began to talk to Timothy. She did not ask him leading questions. She just let him talk. And the story that emerged was different from the one in the police report. He remembered the car, the deep, throaty roar of its engine. He remembered the color, a dark, metallic blue, like the sky just after the sun goes down. And he remembered something else, a small, crucial detail his traumatized mind had suppressed. He remembered a sticker on the car's rear bumper, a sticker for a local exclusive golf club, the one whose membership rolls were a who's who of Harmony Creek's elite. It was the thread, the single loose thread that Carter and Flores had been searching for. The golf club's membership was private, but its list of recent tournament winners was not. And the winner of the last month's Carmichael-sponsored charity tournament, pictured in the local paper, beaming as he accepted a trophy from Preston Carmichael Sr., was his son, Preston III, and parked behind him in the photograph, gleaming in the sun, was a dark blue vintage convertible sports car. They had their man, and they had the photographic evidence that tied him to the vehicle. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a few days later. Flores, acting on a hunch, started looking into Preston III's social media. His accounts were private, but the accounts of his friends were not. She found a photograph posted on the night of the accident, a blurry selfie taken at a roadside bar 10 miles outside of Harmony Creek. In the photo, a drunk, laughing Preston Carmichael III was slurring his way through a karaoke song. The timestamp on the photo was less than an hour after the hit and run. And in the background of the photo, visible through the bar's window, was the front end of his blue convertible, a fresh, ugly scrape and a spiderweb crack visible on the passenger side headlight. It was the confirmation. He had hit the boy, and instead of stopping, instead of rendering aid, he had fled the scene and gone to a bar with his friends, secure in the knowledge that his family's name and power would protect him. He had left a boy to die on the side of the road and had left an innocent man to take the fall, all without a second thought. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it was a perfect crystalline distillation of everything Carter and Josiah were fighting against. Carter now had the car, the driver, the motive, and the proof of a cover-up. He had the ammunition. Now, all that was left was the trial, and it was going to be a war. If Josiah's quiet, unyielding fight for his honor has captured your respect, a super thanks is the most powerful way you can help us continue to tell the stories of forgotten soldiers who deserve to be remembered. The first day of the trial of Josiah Cole was a major event in Harmony Creek. The small, stately courthouse, a relic of the Old South with its towering white columns and manicured lawns, was surrounded by a swarm of media vans and satellite trucks. The national attention that Ben Carter had so skillfully cultivated had transformed a local case into a national spectacle. The courtroom itself was packed to the rafters, a stifling, claustrophobic space filled with a tense, palpable energy. On one side of the aisle sat the town's establishment, the Carmichaels. In the front row, a portrait of grim, aristocratic indignation, their allies, the mayor, the bank president, their faces set in masks of stern disapproval. On the other side sat a strange new coalition that Harmony Creek had never seen before, a contingent of veterans, some in wheelchairs, their dress uniforms adorned with medals. Sarah Gable, Timothy's mother, her face a mask of anxious conflict, and a handful of the town's quieter, less powerful citizens, like the old jail guard who had come to bear silent witness. Josiah entered the courtroom, not in a prison jumpsuit, but in a simple, dark, and perfectly tailored suit that Carter had arranged for him. He walked with his back straight, his head held high, his movements calm and deliberate. He did not look at the jury, nor at the crowd. He walked to the defendant's table and sat down, a silent, powerful island of stillness in the churning sea of the courtroom. He was the embodiment of the discipline Carter had drilled into him. He was a command sergeant major on trial, but not on the defensive. The prosecution, led by a local district attorney named Frank Miller, a man whose political ambitions were inextricably linked to the Carmichael family's patronage, began its case. Miller was a confident, folksy prosecutor, skilled at playing to the prejudices and assumptions of a small-town jury. He painted a picture of Josiah as a dangerous outsider, a man with a history of violence learned in the military, a ticking time bomb who had snapped and attacked an innocent all-American boy. He paraded a series of witnesses to the stand, the arresting officers, who recounted their version of the events with a rehearsed, confident smoothness. A neighbor of Josiah's who testified that he was reclusive and unfriendly. It was a case built entirely on character assassination, on innuendo and fear. Carter's cross-examinations were a masterclass in quiet, methodical deconstruction. He did not shout or grandstand. He was a surgeon, using his questions like a scalpel to slowly, precisely cut the prosecution's case to ribbons. With the arresting Officer Davis, he was relentless. "Officer Davis," he began, his voice deceptively gentle, "you testified that my client was agitated and uncooperative at the scene. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir," Davis said, puffing out his chest. He had a look in his eye. The look of a man who had just been performing CPR on a grievously injured child, perhaps, Carter asked. The question a quiet, devastating jab. He then produced the photos from the crime scene, photos of Josiah's shirt, which he had used as a tourniquet. "This shirt, officer, you took this into evidence. Did you at any point have it tested by a forensics lab to see if the way it was tied was consistent with a standard military field tourniquet, the kind a trained combat medic would know how to apply?" Davis stammered, his confident demeanor beginning to crack. "Well, no, we didn't think it was necessary." "You didn't think it was necessary," Carter repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "So you saw a black man with his hands on a white child, and you made an assumption. You didn't investigate. You arrested. Is that a fair summary of your procedure that night?" The objection from the prosecutor was sustained, but the damage was done. Carter had planted the first crucial seed of doubt, not just about the evidence, but about the very competence and impartiality of the police. The turning point of the trial, however, came with the testimony of Timothy Gable. The boy, pale and nervous, was helped to the witness stand, his leg in a heavy cast. The prosecutor, Miller, handled him with a gentle, paternalistic care, leading him through his rehearsed, confused account of the attack. He spoke of a shadow, of a man grabbing him, his memory still a jumble of fear and trauma. He was a sympathetic, compelling witness for the prosecution. Then it was Carter's turn. He did not approach the boy with a lawyer's aggression. He approached him with a quiet, gentle respect. "Timothy," he began, his voice soft, "I'm not going to ask you a lot of questions. I just want you to look around this courtroom. Take your time. I want you to look at all the faces here. And I want you to tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury if you see the man who attacked you." The boy's gaze, wide and fearful, swept across the room. It passed over the prosecutor's table, over the jury box, over the spectators. It finally settled on the defendant's table, on Josiah. The two of them looked at each other for a long, silent moment. Josiah's face was calm, his expression not of anger or of judgment, but of a quiet, profound empathy for the boy's ordeal. "Is that the man, Timothy?" the prosecutor asked, his voice a sharp, leading prod. "Is Mr. Cole the man who pulled you off your bike?" The boy looked at Josiah, and then at his mother in the front row, her face a mask of agonized tension. He looked at the floor. I don't know," he whispered, the words barely audible. "It was dark. I was scared. I don't remember his face." It was not the exoneration Carter had hoped for, but it was enough. It was a crack in the prosecution's central narrative. The victim himself could not identify his attacker. The final witness was Josiah Cole himself. He walked to the stand with the same quiet, deliberate dignity with which he had entered the courtroom. Carter led him through his story, not just the events of that night, but the story of his life, of his 25 years of service. He presented Josiah's military record, his commendations, his medals, entering them into the official record. And then he asked him the one question that mattered. "Command Sergeant Major," he said, using the title as a deliberate, respectful weapon. "Why didn't you just walk away? When you saw that accident, why didn't you just keep walking and avoid all of this?" Josiah looked not at Carter, but at the jury. He looked at each of them one by one, his gaze steady, direct, and unflinching. "Because my oath of service didn't end when I took off the uniform," he said, his voice a low, clear rumble that filled the silent courtroom. "That oath is to protect and defend. It doesn't specify who or where. When I saw that boy on the side of the road, he was a casualty and a soldier. A soldier never leaves a casualty on the field. You do your duty, no matter the cost." The simple, profound honesty of his words, the quiet, unshakable integrity of the man who spoke them, was more powerful than any legal argument. It was the truth. It was a truth that resonated in the heart, a truth that could not be twisted or denied. In that moment, he was not a suspect. He was not a defendant. He was a man of honor, a man who had been unjustly accused, a man who had been humiliated and imprisoned for doing his duty. And in the faces of the jury, for the first time, Carter saw not suspicion, not fear, but a dawning, profound, and deeply human respect. The tide of the battle was turning. The prosecution's cross-examination of Josiah was the moment the entire trial had been building towards. It was the main event, the frontal assault. The district attorney, Frank Miller, approached the witness stand with the confident, predatory swagger of a man who believed he was about to deliver the killing blow. He saw Josiah not as a war hero, but as a perfect target, a man whose quiet dignity he could twist into arrogance, whose military discipline he could portray as a rigid, unfeeling coldness. His strategy was to provoke, to peel back the layers of Josiah's calm and reveal the ticking time bomb he had described in his opening statement. "Command Sergeant Major," Miller began, his voice dripping with a false, exaggerated respect. "That's an impressive title, a title that comes with a great deal of authority, I imagine. You're a man who is used to giving orders and having them obeyed without question, is that right?" "I'm a man who is used to leading soldiers," Josiah replied, his voice even, his gaze steady. "There's a difference." "A difference?" Miller sneered. "Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your final tour of duty, the one that ended your illustrious career. Operation Iron Scorpion, a name that sounds violent." Carter had prepared Josiah for this. They had gone over the declassified portions of the mission report a dozen times. They knew this was Worthington's poison, the lie that the prosecution would try to use to infect the jury. It was a mission to capture a high-value insurgent leader, Josiah stated, his voice a flat recitation of the official record. "It was a war, Mr. Miller. War is a violent business." "Indeed it is," Miller said, pacing in front of the jury box, his eyes alight with a theatrical fire. "And in that violent business, 2 of your men, a Corporal Jensen and a Private Rivas, lost their lives. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir," Josiah said, a flicker of old, cold pain in his eyes. He saw their faces, young, brave, gone too soon. "They died under your command," Miller pressed, his voice rising. "They died because you led them into a situation where they were outnumbered and outgunned. A catastrophic failure of judgment, some might say. Is it true that you disobeyed a direct order to hold your position and instead advanced on the target, leading your men directly into a prepared ambush?" The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. This was the heart of the lie, the twisted half-truth Worthington had unearthed. "I made a command decision based on the intelligence I had at the time," Josiah said, his voice as cold and hard as iron. "The intelligence provided by your superiors was that the target was lightly defended," Carter interjected, standing to raise an objection, but Josiah gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Let him come," the gesture said. "This is my fight." The judge, intrigued, overruled the half-formed objection. "My intelligence," Josiah continued, his gaze locked on Miller, "indicated that the enemy was preparing an IED ambush on our primary route. The order to hold position would have left my men sitting ducks. I chose an alternate route of approach. The intel about the target's defenses was wrong. We walked into a hornet's nest. I did not lead my men into an ambush, Mr. Miller. I led them away from one ambush and into another that no one, not even your so-called reliable sources, knew was there. I brought the rest of my platoon home that day. That is the truth." He did not raise his voice. He did not get defensive. He simply stated the facts with the brutal, unadorned clarity of a soldier. He was giving his after-action report, and his quiet, unshakable confidence was more powerful than any emotional denial. Miller, momentarily thrown off by Josiah's refusal to be baited, shifted his line of attack. "So, you're a man who is not afraid to disobey orders when you think you know better," he said, trying to reframe Josiah's heroism as insubordination. "A man who takes matters into his own hands. Is that what happened on the night you found Timothy Gable? Did you see a boy, perhaps acting disrespectfully, and decide to take matters into your own hands? Did you decide to teach him a lesson, Sergeant Major?" The courtroom was silent, every person in the room leaning forward, waiting for the explosion. They were waiting for the ticking time bomb to detonate. Josiah looked at Miller, and for the first time, a profound, almost pitying sadness entered his eyes. He saw not just a prosecutor, but a small man, a bully, a man who could not comprehend a world in which people acted out of a sense of duty, not out of anger or self-interest. "Mr. Miller," Josiah said, his voice a low, rumbling sigh, "you have spent this entire trial talking about my past, about a war you have only ever seen on television. You have tried to portray me as a monster, but the only monster in this story is the man who hit a child with his car and left him to die on the side of the road. The only monster is the system that would rather prosecute a man for trying to save a life than hold a powerful family accountable for their crimes. I'm not on trial here, sir. This town, its justice, its honor, that is what is on trial." With that, he was done. He had not just defended himself, he had turned the tables, putting the entire corrupt system of Harmony Creek in the dock. The prosecutor, sputtering, had no more questions. The air in the courtroom was thick with a new, uncertain energy. The simple black and white narrative the town had been fed was beginning to crumble, and in its place, a more complex and much uglier truth was beginning to emerge. The final act of the drama belonged to Ben Carter. In his closing argument, he did not just summarize the evidence, he told a story. He told the story of two men. One, a boy born to immense wealth and privilege, a boy who had never known consequences, who, on the night in question, acted with a cowardice and a selfishness that was breathtaking in its depravity. And the other, a man born with nothing but his own character, a man who had dedicated his life to serving his country, who had faced down death in the deserts of a foreign land, and who, on that same night, acted with a courage and a sense of duty that was humbling. He presented the jury with the final, damning pieces of evidence Flores had uncovered. The photograph of Preston Carmichael III with the blue convertible, the time-stamped social media post showing him at the bar, and a sworn affidavit from a mechanic in a neighboring town who admitted that a panicked Preston had paid him an exorbitant amount of cash to repair the front-end damage to the car the day after the accident and to keep his mouth shut. And then Carter delivered his final, powerful volley. "The prosecution wants you to believe that this case is about a simple assault," he said, his voice ringing through the silent courtroom. "But it is not. This case is about a choice. The same choice that faced my client on that dark road. The choice to act or to do nothing. The choice to uphold your duty or to walk away. Josiah Cole made his choice. He chose honor. He chose to help a fallen child. And for that, the very system he swore an oath to defend has sought to crush him. Today, you have that same choice. You can choose to accept the easy, comfortable lie that the powerful have fed you, or you can choose to do your duty. You can choose to see the truth. You can choose to give this good, honorable man his life back. The choice, he concluded, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the 12 men and women in the jury box, is yours. The jury was out for less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman, a middle-aged woman with a kind but determined face, stood to read the verdict. The entire courtroom held its breath. "On the charge of assault and battery," she said, her voice clear and strong, "we, the jury, find the defendant, Josiah Cole, not guilty." A gasp, followed by a wave of murmurs and a few scattered bursts of applause, swept through the room. Josiah sat, motionless, as the words washed over him. He did not smile. He did not cry. He simply closed his eyes for a moment, a single silent tear tracing a path down his stoic face. It was the tear of a soldier who, after a long and brutal war, had finally come home. The verdict was a seismic shock to the foundations of Harmony Creek. It was more than a legal decision. It was a rebellion. For the first time in the town's long, sleepy history, the Carmichaels' iron grip had been broken, their power publicly defied and defeated. The news spread like wildfire, a topic of hushed, incredulous conversations in the diner, the post office, and on the pristine verandas of the town's most influential homes. The established order, a thing that had seemed as solid and immovable as the granite Confederate soldier in the town square, had been shaken to its core. For Josiah, the moment of his exoneration was not one of triumphant celebration. As the courtroom erupted around him, as Ben Carter clapped him on the shoulder, a rare, genuine smile of victory on his weary face, Josiah felt only a profound, bone-deep sense of release. The weight he had been carrying, the crushing burden of a false accusation, simply lifted. He walked out of the courthouse a free man into the bright, late afternoon sun. He was met not with the stares of suspicion and contempt that had followed him for weeks, but with a strange, new kind of attention. A small crowd had gathered on the courthouse steps. At the front of it was Sarah Gable, Timothy's mother. Her face was a complex tapestry of emotions: guilt, relief, and a deep, maternal gratitude. She approached him hesitantly, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. "Mr. Cole," she began, her voice thick with unshed tears, I am so sorry for what they put you through, for not speaking up sooner. I never believed it was you. Not really, I was just scared." "There's nothing to forgive, ma'am," Josiah said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. He saw in her not an accuser, but another victim of the Carmichaels' corrupting influence, a good woman who had been intimidated into silence. "How's your boy?" "He's getting better," she said, a real smile finally breaking through her tears. "The doctors say he'll make a full recovery, and he wants to thank you, properly, when he's strong enough." "That's all the thanks I'll ever need," Josiah said. And he meant it. His reward was not the verdict, but the knowledge that the boy was safe, that his action on that dark road had not been in vain. Others from the crowd came forward, the veterans, the old jail guard, a few of his former co-workers from the inn, their hands outstretched, their faces full of a newfound respect and admiration. They saw him now, not as the invisible gardener, but as the hero he was. He was a stranger to them, but he had fought for the soul of their town, and in doing so had become a part of it in a way he had never intended. But the war was not over. The acquittal of Josiah Cole was only the first battle. The second, the battle for true justice, was just beginning. Ben Carter, his blood up, was not a man to leave a victory half won. The day after the trial, he held a press conference on the courthouse steps. With the national media recording his every word, he announced that he was filing a multi-million-dollar civil lawsuit against Preston Carmichael III for the hit and run, and against the Carmichael family, the Harmony Creek Police Department, and the DA's office for malicious prosecution, conspiracy, and the violation of his client's civil rights. He was not just seeking compensation for Josiah, he was seeking to dismantle the entire corrupt machine that had tried to destroy him. "This is not about money," Carter declared, his voice ringing with a righteous fury. "This is about accountability. This is about sending a message that in this country there are not two systems of justice, one for the rich and one for the poor. There is only one, and it is for everyone." The lawsuit was a declaration of total war, a direct assault on the very heart of the Carmichaels' power, and it was a war the Carmichaels, for the first time in their lives, were not sure they could win. The harsh glare of the national media spotlight, a light that Carter had so skillfully directed, was a disinfectant, and it was beginning to expose the rot and decay that had festered in the shadows of Harmony Creek for generations. For the Carmichaels, the public humiliation was a fate worse than any financial penalty. Their name, once a symbol of power and respect, was now synonymous with corruption and injustice. Preston Carmichael Sr., and a proud, arrogant man who had never had to answer to anyone, was suddenly facing a barrage of questions from reporters every time he left his mansion. His business partners were getting nervous. His political allies were beginning to distance themselves. The fortress of his influence, which had seemed so impenetrable, was beginning to crumble. His son, Preston III, the golden boy, the heir apparent, was now a pariah, a subject of national scorn. The charges against him for the hit and run, which the DA had been forced to file in the wake of Carter's revelations, were just the beginning. The civil suit threatened to expose the family's entire web of financial and political corruption. The pressure was immense. The family, which had always presented a united, formidable front to the world, began to splinter from within. Josiah, meanwhile, wanted none of it. He had been vindicated. His name had been cleared. His honor had been restored. That was all he had ever wanted. He had no interest in the money, in the lawsuits, in the continuing media circus. All he wanted was to return to the quiet, orderly life he had built for himself, to the simple, satisfying labor of his garden, to the silence. But he found that the silence he had once craved was no longer there. His life had been irrevocably changed. He was no longer the invisible man. He was a local hero, a minor celebrity. People would stop him on the street to shake his hand. The owner of the Magnolia Inn, in a gesture of profound public apology, had not only offered him his job back, but had offered him the position of head groundskeeper with a significant raise in pay. He was a man who had always lived in the shadows, and he found the glare of the spotlight uncomfortable, disorienting. He found his only real solace in his conversations with Ben Carter. The two men, the rumpled, cynical lawyer and the stoic, disciplined soldier, had forged a deep and unlikely friendship, a bond built on mutual respect and a shared, uncompromising code of honor. They would sit in Carter's cluttered, temporary office, drinking coffee, two old warriors dissecting their victory. "You know they're going to want to settle," Carter said one afternoon, sifting through a mountain of paperwork. "The Carmichaels. Their lawyers have been calling. They're terrified of what a full discovery process will uncover. They're willing to write a very, very large check to make this all go away. I don't want their money," Josiah said, his voice firm. "I know," Carter said, a wry smile on his face. "That's what makes you so damn dangerous to them. You're the one man in this whole mess who isn't motivated by greed. It drives them crazy, but we have to think strategically. A settlement, if we structure it correctly, isn't just about money for you. It can be a weapon. It can be a tool for change." Carter's idea was brilliant. He proposed a settlement that had very little to do with a personal payout for Josiah. Instead, he drafted a set of terms that would force a systemic, structural change in the town of Harmony Creek. The Carmichaels would be required to fund a new, independent civilian oversight board for the police department. They would have to create a multi-million-dollar charitable trust to be administered by a board of community leaders, including Sarah Gable and the old jail guard, dedicated to providing scholarships and small business loans for the town's less privileged residents. Then Preston Carmichael III would be required to issue a full public apology to both Josiah and the Gable family, and to perform 1,000 hours of community service, working in the very hospital where Timothy Gable was recovering. It was not a request for money, it was a demand for reparations. It was a demand that the Carmichaels use their immense wealth not to protect their own power, but to heal the community they had so profoundly wounded. It was a form of justice that was more profound, more lasting, and more humiliating for the Carmichaels than any simple financial penalty. Faced with the alternative, a long, brutal, and publicly devastating court battle that threatened to expose generations of their dirty secrets, the Carmichaels had no choice. They capitulated, they surrendered. The signing of the settlement agreement was a quiet, anticlimactic event, a far cry from the high drama of the trial. It took place not in a courtroom, but in the sterile, impersonal conference room of Ben Carter's Atlanta law firm. Josiah was there, dressed in his same simple, dark suit, a silent, imposing presence. On the other side of the long, polished mahogany table sat Preston Carmichael Sr. and his son, Preston III, flanked by a team of expensive, grim-faced lawyers. The Carmichaels, who had for so long been the undisputed kings of their small world, looked diminished, their usual arrogance replaced by a sullen, resentful compliance. They were not there to negotiate, they were there to surrender. The documents were signed, the pens scratching on the heavy paper the only sound in the room. It was the formal, legal end of a war, a treaty that redrew the map of power in Harmony Creek. For Josiah, the moment was not one of triumph, but of a quiet, profound satisfaction. He had not sought this fight, but he had finished it. He had faced down the dragon, and had not just survived, he had forced it to account for the damage it had done. The changes in Harmony Creek were not immediate or magical, but they were real, and they were profound. The Civilian Oversight Board, with the tough, no-nonsense Sarah Gable as its chair, began a slow, methodical review of the police department's policies and personnel. Sheriff Brody, deprived of his political cover and facing a barrage of uncomfortable questions about his department's procedures, took an early retirement. The two arresting officers, Davis and Miller, were reassigned to desk duty. A new spirit of accountability, a concept that had been utterly foreign to the town's governance, began to take root. The Carmichael Charitable Trust, with its millions of dollars, became a powerful engine for change. It funded a new wing for the local library. It provided the seed money for a half-dozen new, small businesses, owned by people who had, for generations, been locked out of the town's economy. It sent kids who had never dreamed of it to college. The money, which had for so long been a tool of oppression, was now being used as a tool of empowerment. It was a quiet, ongoing revolution, funded by the very dynasty that had for so long resisted any change at all. Josiah, true to his word, took no personal money from the settlement. At his insistence, his share of the damages was funneled directly into the new charitable trust. He wanted nothing from the Carmichaels but his good name, which he had already won back. He returned to his small cottage, to his job as the head groundskeeper at the Magnolia Inn. He tried to slip back into the quiet, anonymous life he had once craved, but he found that he could not. The town would not let him. He was no longer the invisible gardener. He was a pillar of the community, a man whose quiet, steady presence was a source of strength and inspiration. People would seek him out, not for legal advice, but for his wisdom, for the calm, centered perspective of a man who had faced down injustice and had won. He became an unofficial mentor to a group of local teenagers, including a now fully recovered Timothy Gable, teaching them not just about gardening, but about discipline, about honor, about the quiet strength of a well-lived life. He was a leader, not because he sought the role, but because it was in his very nature. The command sergeant major had found a new platoon to lead, a new mission to command. He found, to his surprise, that he was no longer haunted by the ghosts of the past. The quiet, purposeful work of tending his garden, of nurturing new life, of helping to heal the small, wounded community he had inadvertently adopted, had a profound therapeutic effect. The noise in his head, the echoes of the desert and the war, had finally begun to quiet. He had found a new kind of peace, not in solitude, but in connection. His friendship with Ben Carter deepened. The rumpled lawyer would often drive down from Atlanta, and the two men would sit on the porch of Josiah's small cottage, drinking coffee, two old soldiers from different wars, finding a deep and abiding comfort in each other's company. They were two sides of the same coin. Two men who had been tested by the world and had refused to be broken, who had held fast to their own uncompromising codes of honor. One warm spring afternoon, about a year after the trial, as Josiah was tending the prize-winning azaleas at the inn, a car pulled up the long gravel driveway. It was not a car that belonged in Harmony Creek. It was a sleek, black, chauffeur-driven sedan with diplomatic plates. A woman emerged from the back seat. She was tall, elegant, and carried herself with an air of quiet, confident authority. She was a woman who was used to being in command. She walked directly to Josiah, her gaze direct and unflinching. "Command Sergeant Major Josiah Cole," she asked, her voice calm and clear. "I'm looking for Josiah Cole, the gardener," he replied, his own voice a polite, non-committal rumble. He did not know this woman, but his instincts told him she was not a tourist. A small, knowing smile touched her lips. "I'm Eleanor Vance," she said. "I've been following your story. A man of your character and unique skill set is a very rare commodity. I have a proposition for you, a new mission if you're interested, a chance to fight a different kind of war on a much larger battlefield." She told him about a new foundation she was building, a foundation dedicated to fighting the very kinds of systemic injustice and corporate malfeasance he had just battled in Harmony Creek. She told him she was assembling a team, a small elite unit of warriors from different fields, law, finance, intelligence, who would be her soldiers in this new war. "I have my lawyer," she said, a nod in the direction of a man like Ben Carter. "I have my financial experts, but what I don't have is a commander, a man with an unimpeachable moral compass, a man who understands strategy, who knows how to lead, and who is not afraid of a fight. I need a man like you, Sergeant Major." She was offering him a new commission, a new command, a chance to take the small local victory he had won in Harmony Creek and apply its lessons on a global scale. It was a staggering, audacious offer. He looked at the beautiful, peaceful gardens of the inn, at the quiet, ordered life he had fought so hard to reclaim. He could stay here. He could live out his days in this newfound peace. He had earned it. But he looked at this formidable woman, at the fire of purpose in her eyes, and he heard the call to duty, a call he had thought he would never hear again. He was a soldier, and a soldier's duty is to serve. His war, he realized, was not over. A new, larger, and more important one was just beginning. He did not give her an answer right away. He simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of the weight of her offer. He looked out at the tranquil beauty of the town, a town that was, in its own small, imperfect way, a better place, because he had been there, because he had chosen to fight. He had learned a profound truth in the crucible of his ordeal. The fight for justice, for honor, for the soul of a community is not a war that is ever truly won. It is a constant, ongoing struggle, a series of small, hard-fought battles, and it requires good soldiers. It requires men and women of honor and courage to stand the line. "Let me show you the roses," he said to the powerful woman who had just offered him a new war to fight. "They're just coming into bloom." He was a gardener. He was a soldier. He was a man who had found his peace, not in the absence of conflict, but in the heart of the fight. He was Josiah Cole, and he was home. The final chapter of Josiah Cole's story in Harmony Creek was not one of a dramatic departure, but of a quiet, deliberate transition. He did not immediately accept Eleanor Vance's offer. He was a methodical man, a strategist, and this was the most significant command decision of his life. For several weeks, he and Ben Carter conducted their own form of due diligence on Ms. Vance and her nascent foundation. Carter, with his deep network of legal and political contacts, investigated her from the top down, examining the corporate structures, the financial underpinnings, the paper trail of her power. Josiah, in his own, quieter way, investigated her from the ground up. He spoke to people, not to her high-powered associates, but to the janitors in her office buildings, to the drivers in her car service, to the people in the shadows of her empire. He was assessing the character of the woman who would be his new general. The reports that came back were consistent. She was ruthless, she was demanding, she was a formidable and often terrifying force in the world of global finance. But she was also, in her own way, a woman of a deep and uncompromising, if unconventional, honor. She was fair, she was loyal to those who earned her trust. And she had, in recent years, developed a profound and genuine desire to use her immense power to rectify the very injustices that the system she had mastered so often created. She was, Carter concluded with a wry smile, the most dangerous kind of billionaire, the kind who has developed a conscience. Josiah's decision, when he made it, was a quiet one. He did not want a grand farewell. He simply began to put his small, orderly life in Harmony Creek into a new, more permanent order. He used his own modest savings, accumulated over years of frugal living, to buy the small cottage he had been renting. He then signed the deed over to a new, local housing trust, with the stipulation that it be used to provide affordable housing for veterans or other low-income residents of the town. It was his final, quiet gift to the community that had, in a strange and unexpected way, become his own. He resigned from his position at the Magnolia Inn, but not not before spending a month training his replacement, a young, ambitious man who was, in fact, Timothy Gable's older brother. He was passing the torch, ensuring that the garden he had so lovingly tended would continue to be cared for. His departure was a slow, deliberate process of disentanglement, a soldier securing his base before moving on to a new theater of operations. His last evening in Harmony Creek was spent on his small porch with the two people who had become his unlikely family, Ben Carter and Sarah Gable. They shared a simple meal, a pot of Sarah's famous gumbo, and they did not speak of the future, of the new, high-stakes world Josiah was about to enter. They spoke of the small, simple things, of the coming tomato harvest, of Timothy's progress in physical therapy, of the surprising and deeply satisfying victory of the local high school football team. It was a quiet, domestic scene, a portrait of a peace that had been hard won. As the sun set, casting a warm, golden glow over the small town, Sarah looked at Josiah, her eyes full of a deep, quiet gratitude. "You changed this town, you know," she said. "You came here looking for peace, and instead you brought us a reckoning. You made us look at ourselves, at who we were, and you made us want to be better." It was the most profound and accurate summary of his time in Harmony Creek. He had been a catalyst, an accidental agent of change, a quiet man whose simple, unshakable integrity had forced an entire community to confront its own soul. Ben Carter drove him to the small regional airport the next morning. The two men, so different in temperament, but so similar in their core of unyielding honor, stood by the gate, their farewell a brief, understated affair. "You sure about this?" Carter asked, one last time. "This world you're entering, it's a different kind of jungle. The snakes wear more expensive suits." "I'm sure," Josiah said. "It's the same fight, just a bigger battlefield." "Well," Carter said, a rare, genuine warmth in his eyes, "if you ever need a good, rumpled and overpriced lawyer to watch your six, you know who to call." He clapped Josiah on the shoulder, a firm, brotherly gesture. "Give 'em hell, Sergeant Major." Josiah simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of their bond. He walked onto the small commuter plane without looking back. He was a soldier, heading toward his next duty station. His time in Harmony Creek was over. But the story of the quiet, honorable gardener who had stood up to the giants and won would become a part of the town's folklore, a cautionary tale for the powerful and a quiet inspiration for the humble. He had left his mark, not with a monument, but with the quiet, enduring legacy of a town that had been forced by the example of one good man to find its own better nature. He had come seeking silence, a place to heal his own wounds, and he had found instead that the truest form of peace comes not from a retreat from the world, but from the quiet, determined and unending fight to make it a more just and honorable place. Your generous support through Super Thanks ensures that the fire of these powerful memories, these stories of quiet courage, and the enduring strength of the human spirit will never be extinguished. Thank you for being a keeper of the flame.